Hi everyone! Today we're cooking a balsamic strawberry quinoa salad with pistachios and goat cheese or feta cheese, whatever you like. I intended to cook this recipe with you live yesterday as the first of the new weekly Chef Girl Nutrition Live cooking series. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties with streaming live to Facebook. I thank you if you did tune in live. I know we had a bunch of people who did join live. We will resume going live next Tuesday and every Tuesday after that. Same time, same place. I hope you will continue to join me live. I wanted to be sure to record a video of cooking the quinoa salad recipe that was intended to cook together live yesterday. I want to make sure that you still get the video of the recipe so you can refer to it to cook this recipe at home. Okay, so let's get started. We will start with the quinoa. Of course, we want to get that going first. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes to cook, and then we want to give it a chance to cool down a little bit. We have a cup of dry quinoa. I'm using white quinoa. I'm sure you've seen different varieties. There's red, there's black, and you can even get the tricolor where you get all three in one package. There's really no significant difference between the three different colors. There's not really a real nutritional difference. If anything, the white quinoa is a little bit more delicate, so it might take a little less time to cook, and it won't have as much of a bite to it. The red or the black quinoa might be a little bit chewier, but otherwise they're interchangeable. So with a recipe like this or any quinoa recipe, you can use whatever, whichever kind of quinoa you have. A lot of times it's just preference for color, to make a more colorful salad. Okay, so to start with quinoa, and really any whole grain that's starting from dry that you're going to boil in water, we want to rinse it. So I'm using a mesh colander. We don't want to use like a regular pasta colander with big holes because the quinoa will fall right through the holes. So you want to use a mesh colander, and I'm just going to rinse it under cold water. And the reason that we rinse the quinoa is for a few reasons. And like I said, with any whole grains, they're going to have something on the outer coating of them that's called phytic acid. And this actually can inhibit the absorption of some of the nutrients that are in whole grains, and especially quinoa's full of tons of vitamins and minerals. So by rinsing them, we rinse off some of that phytic acid to help improve the absorption of those nutrients. It can also help improve digestibility of the whole grains. The longer you soak them, the more digestible they'll become. So you can soak quinoa for like up to overnight. You can put it in a container with, like double the amount of water to quinoa, and let it sit in the water overnight, and that will make it even more digestible. And rinsing the quinoa is also going to get rid of like a little bit of that bitter taste that it might have. And quinoa is actually technically a seed. Similarly to cooking with dry beans, you might find some debris in there just from the harvesting process. So it's always a good idea to kind of pick through and just make sure that there's nothing in there that shouldn't be. Okay, so we have our quinoa rinsed. I want it to drip everywhere. And I'm going to add it to, I have a 3-quart pot here. So I'm just going to toss it in there. Now the quinoa will expand to about 3 times its size when it cooks. So you want to use a bigger pot than you might think. The 1 cup of dry quinoa looks pretty small, but it will expand to like 3 times its size. So we want to make sure that we're using a pot around this size. And then we're adding 1.5 cups of water to the quinoa. You can also use vegetable stock or chicken stock. That'll give it even more flavor. If you're using water like I am here, we're also going to add like a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. We want to season the quinoa on its own so that it has some flavor itself. So we want to season it. If you're using any sort of stock or broth that's already seasoned, even if it's low sodium, it's still going to have salt in it, then you don't need to add any extra salt to the quinoa, but you want to add salt if you're using water. Okay, and I just gave it a little stir just to mix the salt around. We're going to put the lid on, and I'm turning the heat up to high, so we want this to come to a boil. This is the same way that you would cook any grain, just the ratio of the amount of grain to the amount of liquid varies, but generally this is the same process that we're going to bring it to a boil, and once it comes to a boil, we'll reduce the heat down to low and just keep it at a simmer. Okay, so we don't start the timer on this until we lower the temperature to a simmer. Okay, so that's set, so we'll leave that and wait for that to come to a boil. And the next thing we can work on is the strawberries. These balsamic honey strawberries are delicious. They're also really good to put like on top of yogurt. I have a recipe up on my site for a strawberry ricotta cheese bruschetta. So if you wanted to make that even more, fancy and delicious, you could put these honey balsamic strawberries on the bruschetta instead of plain. So we want a cup and a half of chopped up strawberries. So I have some chopped up here, and I'll just show you a couple just to show you how I chop them up. But it's really just a rough chop, okay? We just want them like in small enough like bite-sized pieces. So you can slice them. You can just kind of chop them into chunks. So I just kind of chop them into chunks here. Just cut off the very edge there, and then I just flip it on its flat side, cut it in half, and then just kind of give them a rough chop like that, and that's it. Doesn't have to be any sort of perfect way, but you can also just kind of run your knife through like that and slice them, and then just cut these guys in half. And that also works. Okay, so my quinoa came to a boil, so I lowered the heat all the way down to bring it down to a simmer. So now I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes. And I will check it at 15 minutes. The time will vary slightly depending on your stove, and like I have an electric stove, so it's a little bit more difficult to regulate the temperature on the electric stove. So it's harder to bring the temperature down. So just kind of keep an eye on it. We'll know that the quinoa is done when all of the water is absorbed. So generally somewhere in the 15-minute range it will be ready. Okay, so now we will start on our strawberries, because these are also going to get cooked a bit. So we're going to want these to have a chance to cool down slightly also, so we can get these going while the quinoa is cooking. So I'm just using a small non-stick skillet. It doesn't even have to be non-stick, really. You can use whatever you have, but you don't really need anything much bigger than like an 8-inch pan. We're going to do this over a medium heat. If you are using a non-stick pan, always make sure you're using non-stick safe cooking utensils, so something like this, like silicone or a wooden spoon. You really just want to stay away from anything metal that can scratch the non-stick surface. So to our strawberries, we are adding a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar. And this same recipe that we're using for the strawberries with the balsamic vinegar and the honey, you can use it for really any fruit. I've done the same recipe with peaches, which are coming into season now also. Also tomatoes, also coming into season now. And like I said, it just gives them like this different sweet, tangy flavor. And you can use them in anything. Okay. My honey's been a little bit fickle with me coming out of this thing. Okay. So 1 tablespoon of balsamic vinegar, 2 teaspoons of honey for 1.5 cups of chopped strawberries. Jeez, man. Okay. Okay. Honey was very uncooperative. Okay. So we'll give these strawberries a toss. Just want to get them all nice and coated with the balsamic vinegar and the honey. And you also totally could skip this, this, the balsamic honey sauce almost will then help flavor the quinoa even more, so it makes it really just extra yummy. But you could also just put fresh chopped strawberries into the same quinoa salad if you just wanted to skip this step of, cooking the strawberries. And we're just going to cook the strawberries enough that they soften a little bit, but because they're going into the quinoa, we want them to still have a little bit of a bite. So we don't want this to turn into like strawberry jam, although that would be delicious, and you actually could continue cooking it down even more and have almost, more of like a jammy texture to it. But we're just going to cook them just for like 3 to 5 minutes, just until they're slightly softened. And what we want as these are cooking, we want it on a medium heat. We want to see the liquid sort of bubbling, and if it's bubbling, that means that it's evaporating out of the pan, and so that's what's going to help it thicken up a little bit, so that we don't just have all this, all this extra liquid. But like I said, whatever liquid does remain in the pan once these are cooked will just help to flavor that quinoa even more. So these don't really need much attention. Like I said, we'll just let them go for like 3 to 5 minutes until they're just slightly softened. So you do just want to keep an eye on it. You can set a separate timer for it so you don't forget, because like I said, we don't want it to turn into strawberry jam. Okay, and while that stuff's cooking up, we can talk about the other ingredients that are going into the quinoa salad. So I have already some chopped up pistachios. So these are already roasted, and I just chopped them up, just in rough chop. You totally don't have to use pistachios. If you don't like pistachios, you don't have pistachios, you can use any kind of nut that you like. You could even use some kind of seed, like pumpkin seeds, really anything, almonds, pecans, anything would be delicious, so whatever you like. But I do recommend that you roast them, whatever kind of nut that you're using, if they're not already roasted when you buy them. I recommend just toss them in the oven at like 300 degrees for about 10 minutes or so, and it'll bring out a whole new flavor that will really kind of amp that up a bit. And you'll just give them a rough chop, so we're using 1/4 cup of chopped nuts. Then we are going to be using the juice of a whole lemon. So I'm just checking on these strawberries here. They're already really nice and bubbly. So I'm actually going to turn my heat off now. Like I said, I have an electric stove, so it's a little bit harder to regulate the temperature. So even when I turn off the heat, this is still gonna cook a little bit. So I have my heat turned off now, and I'll just let them sit. So you can see this is what we want here. It's bubbling, the liquid's evaporating a bit, and the strawberries are nice and softened. The next ingredient for the quinoa is the juice of a whole lemon. So this is the lemon juice really makes it very bright and refreshing and very summery. So I love to add citrus to different summer dishes. It really helps brighten the flavor. To get the most juice out of really any citrus, whether you're trying to juice a lemon or a lime, if you put a little bit of pressure, put your two hands, put a little bit of pressure on the lemon and just roll it, you'll feel that it will get much softer, and that's just really loosening it up so that we can get the most juice out of it. Okay, so just give it a roll until you feel that it's softer. Just cut it in half. And if you have any sort of lemon juicing tool, that's helpful. I always squeeze lemon juice into a separate, a separate bowl, just in case any seeds or anything falls through. Because even with these special tools, you still always end up with a seed. And to get even more lemon flavor, you could also use the zest of the lemon, and that would just make the quinoa salad even more lemony. I have a different quinoa salad recipe up on my website that uses a lot of the same, like it uses the same fresh herbs, but it uses the lemon zest along with the lemon juice. Okay. All right, and I'm going to take those strawberries out of the pan now because we do want them to be able to cool down a little bit. Strawberries here, lemon juice, pistachios, and the last thing that we're going to have to chop up is the fresh herbs. When it comes to the fresh herbs, especially because we're using basil, which we're using fresh mint, we're using fresh basil. Basil is very delicate, so as soon as you cut into it, it will start getting, bruised looking. So we want to kind of just wait until the last minute to chop those up and then just gently fold them in. You don't want to overhandle fresh herbs, especially really delicate ones like basil, parsley, cilantro, and mint too is a bit delicate. So I'm going to wait until the quinoa is done cooking and has cooled and we're just about ready to assemble everything, and then we will chop up the herbs. So while we're waiting for the quinoa to finish cooking, I just want to talk a little bit more about the live cooking series. The whole purpose is to really just connect together in the kitchen. I want you to cook along with me. I don't want it to be too much of, like a lecture, cooking demo. I want it to be that we're really cooking together, which is why I want it to be live. Of course, this one I'm recording now because of the issues yesterday. So each week there will be a different recipe, and the recipe is intended to highlight a seasonal ingredient. And the reason for that is I love cooking with seasonal ingredients. I've talked about it before. Seasonal ingredients are going to be more nutritious, more flavorful. You'll notice a brighter color, brighter flavors, and they also will usually be cheaper, right? Because they're growing in abundance. So they're usually a lot cheaper. Strawberries right now are on super sale. Even organic strawberries are on sale. So that's why I chose strawberries for this recipe, to kind of highlight them. And I also want to highlight that ingredient to hopefully show you a different kind of way to cook with it to help keep you feeling inspired. Something like strawberries or any berries, we might just eat as a fruit or, on top of yogurt or in a smoothie or something like that. So I really wanted to show you kind of a different way that maybe you don't typically cook with strawberries. Okay, so the 15 minutes is up on the quinoa, so I'm going to check that. and bring this closer so I can show you what we're looking for. Let's try it this way. Okay. So what we want to look for is that the water is absorbed, right? So there's no more liquid on the top. And what I'm going to do is I turned off the heat, and then I'm going to just put the lid on, take it off the heat, okay? And we're gonna just let it sit, and it will continue to steam and just finish cooking through. Okay, so our quinoa is done. I want to just show you, so I say in the recipe, and you'll see in most, quinoa recipes or even rice, to fluff it with a fork. So all that means is that we're just kind of breaking it up with the fork to, get rid of any clumps so that we don't have sticky, clumpy quinoa. We have nice, fluffy quinoa. Okay, so you can just see all the water is gone, and that's what we want. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to transfer the quinoa into a big mixing bowl. We want to let it cool down a little bit before we start adding everything else into it. And if you want it to cool down faster, the more surface area that you have, the faster something will cool down, right? So if you put it in like a wide baking dish, it will cool down even faster. And also stirring, will help cool it down a little bit too. So I actually do recommend adding and this goes for like any time you're making any sort of grain salad. We want to add, so we're going to be adding olive oil, lemon juice, and salt to the quinoa. And we will add those in while the quinoa is still warm. So I'm just going to let it cool down a little bit. I just don't want it to be, boiling hot. But the quinoa will absorb the flavors better when it's a little bit warm. And like I said, that goes for any grain that you're cooking with. And I don't like quinoa plain, and I think that's a big deterrent. Is if you've only ever eaten quinoa just like this, like fresh out of the pot, just plain, it's not great. I'm with you, it's not great. But I promise when you add things like lemon juice and fresh herbs, adding these strawberries in, it's gonna change your mind. If of course you really don't like quinoa and this recipe doesn't even change your mind, you can pretty much use the same recipe with a different whole grain. I like to use different hearty grains like farro or wheat berries as the base of a grain dish. So you can experiment, use the recipe with a different grain as well. The great thing about quinoa, it's not just hype that it's a superfood. It really is full of nutrients. It is one of the few plant proteins that is actually a complete protein. So there are 9 essential amino acids. Essential meaning that we must get them from food. Our body can't make them. So that's sometimes an issue with following a fully plant-based diet, like a vegan diet, is needing to get all of those essential amino acids in. So that's something really cool about quinoa, is that not only is it a whole grain, and so it provides us with complex carbohydrates and fiber, but it's also very high in protein, more so than other whole grains. It also has a ton of vitamins and minerals in it, and it really is versatile. So like I said, it's not great plain, but because it's so plain on its own, you can really dress it up however you like, and it absorbs flavors really well. So, okay, so we're just gonna let this cool for a few minutes, and then we will come back and add our olive oil, lemon juice, and salt, and then the strawberries, the pistachios, the goat cheese or feta cheese, and then we'll chop up the fresh herbs and toss those. Okay, So quinoa is cooled down a little bit, so we're going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Olive oil is almost empty. I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it here. The rest of my olive oil. Okay. We're going to add the juice of our lemon and another 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Okay, and with mixing the quinoa, I continue to use a fork. You know, just to, like I said, it's just to help keep it from getting clumpy. I want to keep all of the grains separated, and a fork is the best way to do that. So seriously, even if you just taste the quinoa as is like this, it's probably already a lot more flavorful than, you know, what you typically get out of quinoa, again, because plain quinoa is not great. But even just adding the olive oil, the lemon juice, and the salt makes a huge difference. Okay. And you can give it a taste here just to see how it is, how it seasons to your liking. Add a little more salt if you need. No, that is good. Okay, then to that, we can add our strawberries. Okay, and just want to gently fold those in. Plus it makes it turn like a nice pink color, which is pretty. And that's actually why I like to use the white quinoa for this, because it turns pink from the strawberries. But if you were making like a different kind of quinoa salad, where it wouldn't turn color, using like the tri-colored quinoa just gives it a pretty appearance. Okay. All right, so at this point, we're here. We have the quinoa mixed up with the strawberries. So at this point, we can chop up the herbs because we're just about done. So I'll just show you how I work with these. So I'm just going to chop them all up together because it's all going in the same place. So we have fresh mint here, fresh basil here. So fresh herbs are also in season now, which is why I also wanted to highlight those. And fresh herbs are not just, you know, green things that are that are on your plate as a garnish, but they're plants, right? So they have a ton of health benefits. They're also, you know, they just like the strawberries, they also have a lot of antioxidants, anti-inflammatory properties. You can see here, I'm just rolling it up nice and tight. Like I said, with the herbs, we don't want to overwork them. So you want to be able to just run your knife through just a few times just to get a nice rough chop on them. Okay, and then I'm just going to run my knife through the long way, and that's it. That's all you need, just a nice rough chop of them. We don't want to overwork them and get them all bruised. Mint is also really good for digestive health. So you might see mint as like a mint oil or mint tea. You can actually make fresh mint tea using fresh mint leaves. You can just muddle them up in a mug and pour some boiling water over it. And yeah, so fresh herbs are not just there as garnish. I know when I was a kid, I literally used to pick like every little piece of green thing off of my plate if like there was parsley garnished on my plate. But they actually do have health benefits. So anywhere that you can think to toss fresh herbs in, you can just add it to a regular salad, you know, a regular green salad, any grain salad, making different kinds of pestos and herb sauces and things it will add a lot of flavor to your dish, and you'll also get all of the health benefits of the fresh herbs. And like I said, they're in season now, so now's a great time to kind of experiment with fresh herbs. We can add everything else to our quinoa now. So I have the chopped pistachios, and like I said, I'm using goat cheese here. I'm just gonna crumble with my hand. But you can use my favorite alternative if you don't like goat cheese, because I know goat cheese can be one of those like really polarizing foods that people either love it or hate it. My favorite alternative to goat cheese would be feta cheese, but you can really use, like, you could toss some fresh mozzarella cheese in here, blue cheese or gorgonzola cheese. Again, like recipes like this are really not set in stone. It's kind of just giving you like a base to work with. And you know, I said before, the quinoa itself is very versatile and will kind of soak up whatever you add to it. So this is just a good like base recipe for the quinoa, and then you can kind of toss in whatever you like. The other recipe that I have for my quinoa pilaf that's on my site, I show adding different roasted vegetables in there, so you can use whatever veggies are in season, and toss some roasted vegetables into the quinoa salad. Just gonna rinse my hands. Okay, so we just kind of fold the pistachios and the cheese in. And then at the end goes our herbs. So we want the herbs to be the last thing that we toss in, so that they don't get damaged, and you just want to gently fold them in. Okay, and look how pretty. Okay, so now the quinoa turned kind of pink from the strawberries. We have the bright green from the herbs. There's good texture in here. We have the crunch from the nuts. And that's it. This quinoa was still a little warm, so the goat cheese is actually sort of melted in there. But that's it. So this will keep in the fridge for like up to 4 days. I'd say that's usually where I cut off any grain dish, at like 4 days. It's great as, this is perfect for lunch, just as is. If you want it to be like a heartier meal for dinner, you could add some extra protein to it. Add chickpeas if you want to keep it vegetarian. You could add some shredded chicken in there, whatever you want. Or it's great as a side dish. It's perfect for like a summer barbecue as a side dish. Or it's just great to have on the side of like a piece of grilled chicken or grilled salmon. So that's it. So if you try the recipe, let me know how you like it. Let me know if it changes your mind about quinoa. I would love to see pictures if you make it. And stay tuned for the recipe for next Tuesday. We will continue on with the live cooking series as planned every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Mountain Time, 6 p.m. Eastern, on the Chef Girl Nutrition Facebook page. And I will see you then.